that the ANC met with a number of parties, including the EFF. There were constructive discussions. Are you able to share with us how constructive those were? What did they propose? What did you put on the table before the ANC?
No, look, we have, as the Economic Freedom Fighters, met with the leadership, the delegation from the ANC, which came. First meeting was to say they've got 3 different options as to what should happen now that there's no outright winner after the 2024 general elections. And then the next meeting they came to say that they came from the National Executive Committee to say that they are proposing a government of national unity which includes all political parties that contested elections. And then we say that doesn't make sense. It's not sensible to say that all political parties that contested elections must form government together. We then said that there has to be sound ideological principles and foundational values that define whoever is going to constitute government together, so that you do not spend a lot of time debating and clashing amongst each other as government as to what foreign policy positions do you take, how do you interpret the poverty, inequality, and unemployment crisis that is defining South Africa. How do you approach the redress question? And our persuasion to the ANC was to say that because despite the fact that we have got substantial ideological differences with the ANC, there are at least some common features that define us and maybe other political parties. One is the emphasis that we should redress the historical imbalances that were caused by colonialism and apartheid. We should redress the imbalances of the past. We should confront white supremacy and domination over the economy. But you have got political parties that do not believe in such ideals, which think that let's just proceed as if there was no colonialism and apartheid in South Africa, who are not even associated at all with the redress question, but also who are saying that let us uplift the very progressive gains that were gained in protection of workers' rights. We then say that there are so many basic principles which we can agree on. Of course, in terms of what happens afterward, we might disagree because our path says that ultimately we should go into economic freedom in our lifetime, which is socialist in character. But in the immediate, there are issues which we can agree upon with the African National Congress as to what do we confront as government. We can have common foreign policy because more or less we agree as to association with the global south and progressive forces all over the world. So but the ANC then took an approach that they want to constitute a government of everyone else who has contested election, and we thought that that is not a wise decision because we should have a clear agenda of what we seek to achieve. Who else did you have reservations about? Was it only the Democratic Alliance that you felt you are too ideologically opposed to, or would you be okay if the ANC said, let's involve any other party but the Democratic Alliance? Look, the reality of the matter in South Africa is that the Democratic Alliance and even the South African electorate have been utilizing the Democratic Alliance as an instrument to protect white interests, like those that were gained in white privilege that was gained because of colonialism and apartheid in South Africa. That is why you've got a situation that almost 100% of white electorate in South Africa vote for white political parties. If they don't vote for the DA, they vote for the Freedom Front Plus. So you would see that in these 2024 elections, the DA did not necessarily grow. They never actually gained additional votes from the black majority and African electorate. They gained the votes which they had lost between 2014 and 2019, which they had lost to the Freedom Front Plus, even the number of seats. So Freedom Front Plus loses 4 seats. The DA gains 4 seats in that intervening period, to show that the white minority have taken a decision that they are going to vote all of them for just 2 white political parties. Maybe some minor components vote for the ACDP, but they just vote that because they want to protect the privilege that they had gained, the advantage that they had gained because of colonialism and apartheid in South Africa. Because if we were to gauge South Africa's socio-economic indications, the unemployment levels amongst white people in South Africa, it's far lesser than the black majority and Africans in particular. Like actually, if we were to gauge the developmental indicators of white people on South Africa, they would be possibly in the top 10 most developed nations in the world in terms of literacy rates, access to education, life expectancy, in terms of the employment levels, in terms of basic, all the indications that show that people are living in a better environment. And that is what they want to protect to the exclusion of everyone else. And that is what they want to protect for the exploitation of everyone else. That is why, if you check the patterns of political party funding and support in South Africa, the white capitalist establishment, they pumped hundreds of millions to parties which must maintain the status quo. And it looks like the African National Congress is joining that band as well, of those that want to maintain the status quo where black people and Africans are just suppliers of cheap and easily disposable labor, whilst the white capitalists continue to exploit and oppress majority of our people and keep them in the spaces that they were segregated upon under apartheid.
So if you have more commonalities with the African National Congress, why did you then support the DA in Ekurhuleni, in Johannesburg, in the metros? Because if you are not too ideologically distant from the African National Congress, why did you offer your support in votes to have mayors in Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni?
Let me give you the latest information now, and then I will come back to that question. We are currently in the same government with the African National Congress in Nelson Mandela Bay, where we are responsible for infrastructure and electricity and water and sanitation. We are currently in government with the African National Congress, where there's an ANC mayor in Ekurhuleni. We are responsible for finance, for healthcare, for waste, for a variety of other responsibilities. Here in the city of Johannesburg, the ANC is in government together with the EFF. The EFF is responsible for public safety and healthcare. We took a correct decision after we had said to the ANC after the 2016 local government elections and after the 2021 local government elections that before we vote for ANC mayors, there are foundational principles that you must agree to in terms of the redress agenda, in terms of prioritizing our people, in terms of the transformative agenda, but also it even elevated some of the national issues. And the ANC arrogantly did not want to talk about the issues that affect our people on the ground. They just want an elite peg that let's just share positions without discussing what then obtains on the ground.
Have they discussed that in this new agreement?
That, by the way, currently, our approach to negotiation now is to then deal with principal issues as to what is in it for the people of South Africa. Before we do the elite peg thing of who must be a speaker, who must be a minister of what and what, we're first discussing the principle of how do we constitute government. And in the past, the ANC did never agreed. Even, by the way, those instances where I gave you of Nelson Mandela Bay, of Ekurhuleni, of Johannesburg, and even in eThekwini in some instances, was never with the approval of the national leadership of the ANC. It was done with the provincial leadership who had said that, but this is logical, we can agree on a common agenda. There seem to be some puppet master who is in control of the national leadership of the ANC, who's telling them what to do. So that characterization of the Democratic Alliance of the EFF as enemy number one seems to be defining a certain section or faction in the ANC to characterize the EFF as enemy number one, which must never be entertained, which must never be interacted with on any issues that involve government. And it seems to be obtaining now because clearly the ANC is going to work with the Democratic Alliance moving forward. I
mean, we're hearing of a possible deal that is almost closed to be signed between the ANC, the DA, the IFP, and the NFP. I'll be bringing the president of the NFP on the show in a few moments, and we'll talk about KZN shortly. But have you completely closed the door to the ANC now? Is it safe to say there's no opportunity to even speak before Friday?
No, look, we haven't. Actually, and as far as we're concerned, the ANC is supposed to come back to us because we have outlined our framework as to what are the terms of engagement. There are principles which we have outlined as to these are the areas which we must appreciate, define the economic freedom fighters, the land question, the matter of nationalization of mines, of banks and other strategic sectors of the economy, massive protected industrialization to create millions of jobs, free education for the poor up until higher education level, insourcing of workers, protection of workers' rights, anti-racism, anti-imperialism. Those are the values that we have given to the ANC, but they don't want to talk about that. They just want to elite pact like they did in 1994. Something that led to the crisis that South Africa has now, where more than 10, if not 11 million people who are unemployed or looking for jobs, where black people are more or less in the same conditions that they were under apartheid because of an elite pact that was reached between the minority white government to say that take political power, we're going to contain and retain economic power. It looks like this 2024, from a concession point of view, from a puppet mastering point of view, is going to be the 1994, because more or less the same things are going to happen where the white capitalist establishment is controlling the ANC to tell them what to do. They become naturally dismissive because their handlers are saying, work with the DA or something else is going to happen. I don't know what that something else is, but they are much more having affinity with the Democratic Alliance and the right-wing forces than the progressive forces. But who in any way we're going to define a common foreign policy agenda, we're going to define a common domestic policy agenda, a common continental agenda as to how do we collectively develop.
But to be clear, for as long as the ANC says, even if they come and say we are committed to the principles you mentioned, but we want to bring in other parties like the DA, that is a non-negotiable for you. You're not willing to, even if they appreciate what you want to cover in your principles and interests, you're not willing to entertain any chat that involves you being with the DA.
As far as we're concerned, that's far. The ANC has never got to discuss any detail of the composition of government and all of those. They speak first on elite pacting, that they want all political parties that must come, but they are avoiding the question of principles, that upon which principles and upon which ideological foundation are we going to constitute this government.
Okay.
And that is problematic because you can't just elite pact. You can't just say, take this position, take that position, and you don't want to talk about what defines that particular government.
Yeah.
And that is where the difference between the EFF and the ANC is on about now. Our view is that the Democratic Alliance, the Freedom Front Plus, diametrically represent different interests to the interest of majority of South Africa, which is about redress of the imbalances of the past, and we have to then deal with that much more differently.
Where does this leave you for Friday's first sitting in Parliament? Will you participate in the voting of the new president?
Look, we are going to be participating in the Friday processes. We had a meeting today with the Umkhonto is a party to try to persuade MK to form part of that particular process. And we will be engaging tomorrow, even on Thursday, with other political parties that even when the puppets of the establishment try to concoct a neoliberal agenda that seeks to continue with the inequalities and the poverty of black people, we should fight back. We should field candidates for speaker, for deputy speaker, for president. And we want to appeal as well to the conscious members of the ANC that if they are given illegal and unlawful instructions, they must vote against such nonsense so that we can constitute a proper government that is going to lead South Africa.
So you will be fielding your own candidates for speaker, for president?
If there is no agreement that is sound between now and Friday, we are definitely going to field candidates for all the positions that are going to be contested.
Let me ask about the EFF's position of a national government of unity and get clarity on what has changed. Because Julius Malema, when he spoke to the BBC last year, was, and I quote here, the president is not carrying the national agenda. We need a government of national unity constituted by all of us who are not driven by political party interests, but the interests of South Africa to resolve this immediate crisis which will affect all aspects of our lives, end quote. He was referring to the challenges the country is facing around the economy, around unemployment, ESCOM. What did he mean by that when he supported then the idea of a government of national unity with all the parties, as he said, but now as the EFF, you're coming and saying that's actually not a position you want to take?
So that context of that interview, which is being opportunistically utilized now, was when we're saying that Ramaphosa must immediately step down And remember, the Constitution says that when a president steps down, the government is dissolved. And then we say that as part of the transitional measures. It was after the Pala situation where we say that Ramaphosa must step down as part of the transitional measures now, so that we don't go to early elections. Let's constitute a government of national unity, whatever it's formed for, because the period towards elections was not necessary to could call early elections. That was the context of it. But also you must appreciate that we're now dealing with the politics of electoral outcomes that came from the 2024 general elections. And by the way, in that period when he spoke about that, it was before the parties whom we had said that ideally in South Africa, when the ANC loses power, it must be taken out of power completely.
Yeah.
But we had a variety and a myriad of political parties who were sponsored by the Oppenheimers to characterize and define the economic freedom fighters as an enemy force.
Yeah.
And we can't stand back and say, you call us an enemy force and then later on want to form a government with you. We will never do that.
To be fair, Floyd, I watched this interview again. This context, the presenter was asking Julius Malema about the crisis, the challenges that the country is facing, and particularly because we're just about to get into, I think, the higher stages of load shedding. So he was asking it around that and not necessarily around President Cyril Ramaphosa and whether or not he must step down. And the response to the challenges like ESCOM, unemployment, the economy, Julius Malema says then we need a government of national unity.
I can tell you now emphatically that the context was due to the failure of Ramaphosa, that Ramaphosa must step down, and in the intervening period, there must be a government. There will never be a period where the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF said that we must constitute a government of national unity. Because remember, our approach to the 2024 general elections was for an outright victory. And there was no way that you could have said that we must constitute a government of national unity post-2024 then. He was speaking in the intervening period that if we recall this one and the government collapses, let's constitute a GNU for transitional purposes, not as a permanent feature.
Let's talk about KwaZulu-Natal. There are reports this evening that there is possibly a deal that is almost to be signed between the ANC, the DA, the IFP and the NFP. And I know you had indicated as the EFF that you would want the MK to lead in KwaZulu-Natal because they would be the party that received the highest of votes. How do you respond to the possibility of this deal that would see the IFP president become premier of KwaZulu-Natal?
We have not yet authenticated that rumor which was spread by Mail and Guardian, by the way. The NFP president is going to talk to you today to either confirm or refute that, but we are not aware of such an agreement. But we think that whatever government is constituted in the province of KwaZulu-Natal should involve Mkhonto weSizwe, because a decisive number of the people of KwaZulu-Natal have voted for Mkhonto weSizwe party. So, the Mkhonto weSizwe party is at like 45-46% of the vote in KwaZulu-Natal. And then the second party is 18% and the other one is 17%. It will be just pure opportunism. It will be unethical to want to constitute a government when a decisive number of the people of KwaZulu-Natal have said that Mkhonto weSizwe is the preferred party.
But why didn't you take that position in Joburg and Ekurhuleni? Because there was a time when the ANC was trying to say to you, the majority of people have voted for us. We've got the highest number of votes. Let's become premier. And yet, what you insisted on as the EFF was, no, let's give the opportunity to the smaller parties, which is why in Johannesburg now, there's a leader from a smaller party that has become mayor.
You know, in the context of Ekurhuleni and Johannesburg, the ANC just is the one that refused to form government in those instances, because we said to them, here are basic principles of issues which, by the way, even constitute your own conference resolutions on the land question, on the creation of a state bank, on the discontinuation of private ownership of the South African Reserve Bank, on the provision of free sanitary towels to girls who cannot afford that, on insourcing of workers. And we say, but these constitute your resolutions. Let's please have to constitute government based on those principles. And then they arrogantly say that we cannot do that. And then what we did purposefully and tactically was to then unplug them from power, because we knew that once we unplug the ANC from power, they become irrelevant as an organization. And we succeeded in reducing the electoral dominance in those spaces where we unplugged them from power. That was a tactical move which was superior and is not applicable to the current conditions, because this is a different sphere of government, and issues that are dealt with are completely different than what we're dealing with in 2016 and 2021.
All right, Floyd, I just want to go through some of the tweets that have come through during our conversation before we wrap up. We've got Olile, who says that cooperation facilitates progress. The leading party must put the interest of the people at the center of any talks. People want delivery, no more talks. That's Olile in Kukuletu. Hashirama says they have no choice, really. They have to compromise, but it looks like there won't be any resolution soon. Every party is still trying to get things going on their own way. And KG says, I expect the political parties, to maintain their policies and ideologies. It wouldn't make sense if an ANC, EFF or MK were to work with a far-right party like the DA. What would they be working on? I love that Floyd clarified that the EFF wouldn't work with the DA. The policies, ambitions and objectives just clash. That's a message there from KG. Thank you so much for sharing with us some of your responses to the question we're asking tonight on Twitter. We'll also play some of your WhatsApp voice notes that have come through. Floyd Shivambu, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Face the Nation.
Thank you very much for having us. And I think, we're clear in terms of how we're moving forward. We've given the ANC an opportunity to respond to issues that reflect the interest of our people. They are not interested in that. They want to elite pact with the Democratic Alliance because they seem to be controlled by the same establishment. We are not going to be part of that. But if they want to talk about the interest of the people, the EFF is available to talk as to how do we constitute a progressive government and will take South Africa forward.
All right, so the door is not completely closed to the ANC. After the break, we'll speak to the NFP president